Hi everybody, and welcome to week 6 of Be Bold, our Easter series on the book of Acts. This week we're going to talk about historical context and why it matters. So first I want to start off by giving an example that is not found in Acts. So growing up, we had this list of scripture that we were supposed to memorize. And one of the verses on it was Joshua 3:19. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you, whithersoever thou goest. And it sounds nice. I remember when I graduated from high school, I got a card from Hallmark, their religious line, whatever they call it, that had that verse in it. Now, I didn't pay much attention to that because, I'll be honest, I was more interested in the check inside the card than I was about the scripture on the card. And then got to seminary and still had all the scripture memorized. Like, it doesn't really leave you, no matter how hard you might try to shake it out of your brain. It's still inside of you in the King James. And so got to seminary and we're studying Joshua, and I discovered that this verse that I had memorized at 8 or 9 years old is when they're about to go into battle. And not only are they about to go into battle, they're about to commit genocide. This is not a pretty scene. And in its historical context, it raises a lot of questions. But when you're 8 or 9, growing up in the church that I grew up in that never really talked about historical context, and when they did, it was completely inaccurate. This verse sounds good, right? Be not afraid. I mean, that sounds great. And we've probably all seen, those links you click it, and here's all the places where it says be not afraid in the Bible. Well, what's the historical context of all of those? Why does it matter what was going on in the wider world at the time? And so Acts is set in the early late Roman Empire. So the empire is going to fall eventually, but we're not quite there yet. We're building up to it. Now, if you have a study Bible, you will possibly have information on the book of Acts, and then when you actually get into Acts itself, all these little notes that sometimes take up most of the page. You might also have some maps so you can see where everybody's going and where we're at. This is the Bible we had to buy in seminary. It's the New Oxford Annotated Bible, New Revised Standard Version with the Apocrypha. So the ELCA does use the NRSV. I will say that the Bible was about $40, I think. I don't think there's a price tag on it anywhere, but I think this was about $40. There is a HarperCollins NRSV study Bible with the Apocrypha that's a little less spendy. You also don't need a study Bible. And I know a lot of you probably have the Lutheran study Bible, and that's completely fine. I would suggest that you stay away from things like the women's study Bible or something of that nature. Like if it has a pink cover and is geared towards women, or a blue cover and is geared towards men, I would steer clear, because that's not what you want, and it's not really a study Bible. You're also going to find a lot of bad theology in it. if you want to know more about the Roman world and you don't want to read really, really thick historical volumes, I'd suggest Mary Beard's SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome. In terms of Roman history books, it's fairly short and it covers a lot of ground, and it's not overly academic. And even if you just skimmed it, you'd have a pretty good idea of what was going on by the time we get to Acts. The other thing that we've encountered a lot in Acts is Greek philosophy and Roman philosophy and this tradition of philosophical debate, which the Jews also had. You know, ask a question and your question gets answered with a question. Well, and there's a reason for it. Now, if you want to read more about philosophy, you can read the works of the ancient philosophers. It's going to take a while, and it's not going to be the most pleasant experience ever, but you could do it. Alternatively, you could read summaries of their work, like get the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes and read those. Or if you want something slightly more academic, but not as academic as reading all the works of the philosophers, I really recommend Plato at the Googleplex, Why Philosophy Won't Go Away. I had to read this for an independent study I did in seminary, and it's honestly one of the best books that I read. It is a little more academic, and it's going to take a little work to get through, but it explains the history of debate and why this history of philosophical debate won't go away and why it matters. You can probably get either one of these in ebook form, possibly even from your local library, so you might not have to spend any money. If you do choose to buy the actual books, might I suggest your favorite local indie bookstore instead of Amazon. So now let's look at the historical context of Acts. Should be easier to do if I wasn't in the Apocrypha. This is why bookmarks would help, but I didn't think that through all the way, which for those of you who know me well should not come as a surprise. So Acts, we know, was written sometime after Luke's Gospel. So sometime after 95 CE, which is just the Common Era. You've probably heard it as AD. Academics tend to use CE and BCE instead of BC. So before the Common Era and the Common Era. And honestly, it's just as problematic as BC and AD. It doesn't really clear anything up. So let's just be clear about that. It's just one more layer of struggle that academia adds to our lives. So Acts was likely written in the late 1st or early 2nd century. And we think maybe it was written by the same person who wrote Luke, but we're not entirely sure. Remember, we talked about this at the beginning. Maybe not. We think that whoever wrote Luke was a Gentile Christian, so not Jewish. But again, we don't know. Acts contains a whole bunch of historical information, not only the history of the church, but kind of what was going on in the Roman Empire at that time as well, which is, again, why context matters. And what we see in Acts is that persecution of Christians was really localized. that we are not yet at a point where there is an empire-wide persecution of Christians. So, all those weird documentaries that pop up on YouTube and the History Channel about how being a Christian during the time that Acts was written was really dangerous, and how these people are putting their lives on the line, and they're all going to be martyrs, in the sense that martyrs who get executed, not martyrs who are witnesses. This is not true. It wasn't really all that dangerous. You weren't really putting your life on the line. Chances are you were still worshiping in the synagogue. And if you were persecuted, it was very localized. The Roman emperor wasn't going, oh, we have to go get all the Christians now. That's not going to happen for a really long time. And even when Christians are persecuted in Acts, no one really knows what to do with them. And we see that. Paul gets arrested how many times, and no one really knows what to do with him. Is he guilty? Maybe, but this isn't a Roman Empire issue. This is an in-house issue for the Jews to solve. And we'll even see this later in the Roman Empire, where the church is growing, and Christians are becoming more powerful, and they're headbutting with their neighbors more and more often. And so you get more and more localized persecutions and more people complaining to the authorities. And the authorities are like, well, what do we do? And so there are all these letters back and forth between governors and other officials going, what do we do with these Christians? We don't want to execute these people, but we're having this problem, and you don't want problems in the Roman Empire. That looks bad. And so what do we do? And so as we finish up the book of Acts, and this summer we're going to spend some more time in some of the shorter epistles in the New Testament, keep in mind that context really does matter. And if you have questions about the context, you can either reach out to me, reach out to Pastor, hit up Google Scholar, which is not quite Google. Don't just go google.com, Roman Empire persecution of Christians. It's a really bad idea. Scholar.google.com. And you'll find scholarly articles about this. Now, you also still have to be careful, but it will filter them out, and hopefully at least what you're getting is peer-reviewed. So context does matter. The early church grew in a Greco-Roman world, and it wasn't separated from that. Just like we are not separated from what goes on today. And, religion doesn't happen in a vacuum. So what happens around us impacts our faith, but our faith can also impact what's going on around us. So as we consider how we can be bold during this season of Easter and during this time of pandemic, let's not forget that our faith and our actions that our faith compels us to can be a force for positive change. Bye, guys.